everybody getting joined on. I've got right at 11 Eastern. We'll give people just a few more minutes and then we will get things kicked off. And obviously, we're getting ready for those. Some people have already started budget season. Some people are looking at that right around the corner. I think as we go into 2023, I'm hoping people are a little bit more aggressive with their marketing budgets and get a little bit more creative in how they spend their money, looking at the customer cycle and that journey that people go through in the online space a little bit differently. So a couple of goals today is just really looking at how we can potentially spend that money. I can geek out pretty hard on some of the different campaigns that we can run in different ways to get in front of very specific audiences. So I've got a plethora of different type of people on today's call, ranging from above property to corporate to brand to agency to vendor. So I'm hoping you get something out of this, no matter what place that you're in and your digital marketing journey. And I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but if not, I'll definitely check it out at the end if you guys have any questions. But otherwise, happy Friday, and I will go ahead and dive in. So again, some of the things we're going to talk about today is just the overall customer journey, how we can increase our online presence, and then different ways to look at how to budget as we go into 2023. So I like to say, and I like to tell owners this too, there's really no magic bullet. There's no one thing that you're going to do if you have an underperforming property. So I encourage you to look at your paid in the same way. How do you diversify your paid media strategy to get in front of audience that align with your total commercial strategy approach and really help the work together with that sales and revenue management team. I also feel pretty passionately about making sure you have different KPIs for different types of paid media strategies. For those that were in Orlando this summer at HSMAI, I did a presentation on how return on ad spend is maybe not always the best metric, and we've kind of trained our owners to focus on that singular KPI. If you want to check it out, it's actually live on HSMAI. It's all of 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and it aligns with the Titanic. So if anybody is a lover of that movie, there's a lot of references that you're welcome to check out after this. So I think when I talk with people, the biggest thing that kind of gets me is people say, oh, we're just going to take last year's budget and we're going to basically ask for 10%, 20% more in spend. And I think while that's probably the easiest approach, I don't think that's tailored. And I understand if you have a lot of properties, maybe that's the way to do it. But I'd like to challenge us to look at budgeting for paid spend a little bit differently. So a lot of the times we like to look at, your channel mix contribution. For example, if you look and say, and even your channel mix contribution against your comp set. So if you look at if you have access to demand or Calibri and you are budgeting, to spend a lot of money Expedia TravelAds, but you're already dominating the competition in your market share on Expedia, maybe you want to shift those funds somewhere else. Same thing if you look at that brand.com contribution and you're crushing the comp set in terms of brand.com production, maybe you want to shift those funds and create a more balanced strategy. Also, just as simple as looking at how you currently perform. So, whether it's organically on Google, whether it's, your OTA rankings, how do you currently rank, and using that as a baseline to basically identify a gap and then close where you have those gaps. Then obviously seasonality. I think it's easy to, budget, X amount per month through the course of the year. And depending on how your accounting and operations like to accrue things, how do we market and budget for seasonality? And then, not waiting until the last second. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about how, is the bottom going to fall out come, as we go into Q3 and Q4, and I feel like I'm going to get some panic calls. So really planning for that seasonality that is going to happen. So I like to look at that customer journey as kind of a flywheel approach instead of a traditional funnel approach, but really looking at different ways that you can use your paid media to affect different places in that journey. And I think every hotel kind of has its own online journey, and I think different paid can be use in different places. So we were going back and forth with how to place some of these paid strategies in different parts of that flywheel or that online customer journey. But at the same time, I think you can use different tactics in different ways. So, display ads generally, are good top of funnel and good for exposure. But if you look at display as relates to remarketing, that's going to be something that's farther down the funnel. Same thing with social media, depending on how you use your social media, how you engage with your current audience, how you target future audiences. There's different ways to look at how to impact that customer flywheel, and then kind of a continual process. How do we hone that approach to continue modifying that and changing that even as the year goes on? So just really looking at how you can affect each hotel is kind of in the maybe doing some things well and some things wrong, or could be doing some things better, and how do we place a paid ad strategy against that? So I think there are, when we talk about different tactics and strategies, my goal is just to look at some different paid campaigns that we can run. We'll start with some of the basics, and then we'll expand to some stuff and different ways you can use paid. So I think a lot of people on the call are familiar with Cody. If you're under that branded hotel ecosphere, then there's a lot of different campaigns you can run through Cody, whether it's OTA ads, Metasearch, display, social for select brands, and then sponsor listings. Now I'll look at each of these differently. So as we look at these different channels, like when do you want to use it? Who do you want to target? And I think some of these might be a little different than how you normally think about it. So obviously, Cody is the backend system that supports all the major brands in terms of different tactics. Each brand has calls it something different, and each brand has different capabilities within that platform. So if it's something you want to read more about, we've written a couple blogs just around Cody. If you're trying to decide if you want to use Cody or the native Expedia TravelAds, we've also written some blogs around that, just to kind of educate you on some of the minuscule differences and help you decide on your own which is going to be the best approach for you and your hotel and company. So Expedia TravelAds, I think everybody on the call knows this. I think sometimes we think of this as some like last minute saving grace, which doesn't really appeal to me. So, I think Expedia TravelAds probably needs to be a part of everybody's strategy, but how do we diversify and not use this as our last minute crutch? I think when we have an underperforming property, and here we are the 19th of August, and someone says, hey, we're not going to meet budget, we like to throw Expedia TravelAds money on it, which I totally get, but it's usually not going to make up that difference of budget, especially if we're spending small dollar amounts. So within the, similar to Expedia TravelAds, there's some other OTA type top of screen biasing ads that you can do. We find that booking and Priceline ads, it's certainly not the funnel, it's not that faucet that you can turn on like Expedia TravelAds, but we usually do see a little bit higher ROI. So again, I think the other thing I like about these is where Expedia, you can have an organic and a paid ad pretty close to each other. Booking's not showing that ad if you already have that organic placement. So it might just be something to continue to diversify for your specific hotel. Metasearch, this is where I might have a different approach than a lot of people, but most of the time I see Metasearch as really a shift in channel. So instead of booking on your, Expedia or hotels.com like you see in the screen, how do we shift that to direct? I do not see this as an incremental revenue channel. So when we're talking with hotels, going back to do we need a budget for Metasearch, we're going to go back and look at your channel mix, see if you have a very high OTA dependency, and if from a profitability standpoint, we want to make a move and spend money in Metasearch. So I think there's a difference of opinion. A lot of people, for whatever reason, see this as an incremental exposure. I don't see it that way. So just might depend on if you want to shift those funds elsewhere. Like we have a couple hotels that are in single digit OTA contribution. So maybe it doesn't make sense to spend more money in Metasearch. Sponsored listings is going to be, getting better placement on your TripAdvisor, Kayak, and also, Google promoted posts. I think you have to look at this on a hotel by hotel basis. Again, not a big spend and not really even a high ROI channel for a lot of our hotels, but it does make sense with certain hotels and certain markets. So social media ads, when we do a lot of social for different hotels, and we really suggest that you have a complementary organic and paid strategy that work together in tandem. So while you can do one without the other, either organic with paid or paid without organic, it doesn't always make sense. I feel like social media can be so cost effective to get in front of new audience, specifically to be able to align with people that are familiar with your brand, or even go after new audiences that align with demand generators in your market. And for branded hotels, I know that, from a remarketing standpoint, some of the capabilities are limited, but even within social, you can remarket to people that have seen your ads, because you're not going to get a pixel on that brand site. So super cost effective. I think you need to look at your KPIs. I think different KPIs for different hotels. You can run RFP programs within social media. You can run more top of funnel or lower funnel, depending on what your goals are. So again, when you look at that customer cycle, I think social media can be pretty flexible to meet some of those different, to reach some of those different segments. So next, I kind of want to look at some of the different paid that you can do on the email side of things. So I think it depends on, are you brand or independent? And then what type of goals that you're trying to achieve. It depends on what platform you might want to be using. So if you're a branded hotel, both Marriott and Hilton have their own exclusive ways to run email marketing to your past guests, or even just kind of brand loyalty members. So the costs kind of range, but it might be something you consider budgeting for, especially if you're Marriott, maybe you budget to do those quarterly or at least twice a year. The clairvoyance campaigns through Hilton are going to be a little bit more expensive, but they do have different service levels. And I think this is best for, smaller full service up into that full service to make that ROI really work for your guests. The nice thing about the clairvoyance is there are also some different segmentation options. And you can do some group blasts as well. So, like multi-hotel ones as well. So something to think about. If you're really trying to go after that meeting planner, we use both ePro Direct and Convention Planet. So again, they're going to be sending out emails on your hotel's behalf. You can segment into specific markets, and you can design your own HTML. So you're usually looking at around give or take $3,000 if you really want a ballpark number. But I think for anybody that's looking to get exposure into that group and convention market in 2023, I think it's worth taking a look at as an exposure play. I think this one's very, this particular option when you talk about email marketing is forgotten a lot of the times. So as we all know, sales teams are really short-staffed. They don't have they're probably just barely able to handle any incoming RFPs or any internal lead volume they're getting. So most hotels are going to utilize their own CRM, whether that's Delphi, Hotel Sales Pro, anything like that. Being able to export that and do mass communications to people that have already engaged or sent a lead into your hotel in the past. We've had a lot of success with more newsletter style. So just instead of going after that hard sell, and filling in those hot dates or group need dates, but really just educating them on what's going on at your hotel and market. And then just being personal about sharing anything from recipes to, somebody getting married. But we just want to keep that top of mind placement with groups and meeting planners, so when they are ready to book, that they have that, they know they have a go-to. To be able to do that. So something else we've had success with, especially with the amount of new openings or hotel conversions that we've had the opportunity to work with, is being able to do some email, and that is for people that don't have basically a database. So if you're starting from scratch and you're just trying to get the name out there, so we work with a partner that has a database of over 150 million contacts. And then you can there's over 750 criteria. So you can really try to hone in on people that would have propensity to visit your specific hotel. And considering, it's an opt-in database, but considering they have no direct awareness with our specific hotels, we've seen some really good rates. So they'll tell you 10 to 20% open rate, 1 to 2% click-through rate, and those metrics are really in line with what we've seen with the ones that we've been testing. So pretty cost-effective to do that one-time e-blast and reach about 50,000 people. But you can also turn that into a programmatic, so email being the base of when you would first reach out to them, and then be able to continue to retarget them and remarket them through social and some other ways to continue with that frequency approach. So just kind of a quick screenshot of how you can really understand that multi-touch approach. And whether you are branded or independent, this is a solution that we have found to work. So I know in that branded hotel space, we are a little bit limited with some of our options, but we have seen this be successful for branded hotels as well. So switching gears a little bit more with some of the other paid strategies that you might want to consider as we go into 2023. You know, basic search engine marketing, you know, through Google Adwords. So I think most people are fairly familiar with this. Really buying ad placement on Google, that also extends into Bing as well. But you know, we really believe this should be part of your organic strategy as well. So in some scenarios, it's just going to be really hard to place organically for certain keywords, so you might have to pay to play. Same thing with any type of new hotels or hotels that are going through a conversion. You might have to have a short-term SEM strategy to make sure you have exposure and get included in that consideration set as people start narrowing down where to stay. And we really go after really non-branded keywords so that, you know, you can increase your exposure on some of those clutch keywords. All right, so display. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that you can leverage some display ads. I think it's probably, this is where, you know, understanding how to leverage that data, how to layer that data and use that in different channels is really key. I think it's something that is harder for owners to grasp because it's a lot of it is very top of funnel. So if you're looking for that direct return on ad spend, a lot of times it isn't always there. But let's kind of talk through some of the ways that you can use some of the data that's out there to target really specific audiences. So when we talk about display ads, what does that mean? So this is going to be the more visually appealing ads that you're going to see as you're looking at other sites. So whether you're looking at the news site, you might, depending on the website, you're going to see all different types of ads, but it's not when you're actually in that shopping phase. So it's very top of funnel. Most of the time, it's going to be that awareness phase and looking for exposure to new markets. So when we talk about leveraging programmatic, and I guess it's easier probably just to read that programmatic ad buying is the use of data layering to reach an intended buyer profile. So really understanding, sending the right message to the right audience at the right time with the right content. So I think there's different ways that you can leverage programmatic. I think the easiest way is to give you some examples so you can understand how you can potentially use it. So the great thing is they're getting data from all these other sources. So whether it's, you know, understanding your credit card patterns or where you've recently logged into or that you just bought a flight. So they can really determine, we really have the opportunity to determine who is in market. So examples would be, you know, that someone has just bought a flight to your market and you want to show them ads, you know, after that specific purchase. Or you know that they just bought tickets to a concert in your market and you're near that concert venue. So that's the time to really show them ads. But you can determine people that are in market, for example, for a luxury beach vacation. I think there's a lot of different ways when you look at all the different parameters and really look at how you can use data layering versus just maybe a single source data, but really building these actual personas to target people at the right time when they're actually in market and potentially looking to make a transaction. And we can really tell when they're actually looking to potentially make a hotel reservation. I think when you want to use this is when you are not really part of that consideration set, and you need to reach buyers earlier in their planning journey. So if we wait too long and they're looking at rates and you're not part of that consideration set, then you're not going to be able to get into that consumer's consideration set likely. So there's a lot of different programs and a lot of different platforms that we use to run programmatic ads. So it really depends on your brand, really depends on the platform, and it really depends on who you want to target. And we'll go into a couple other examples here in a second. This is one I've been really wanting to try, but with the pandemic, it's made it a little bit harder. So device ID targeting allows you to hone in on people that were physically at a given location. So using the device ID, so your cell phone, they can really determine where you were at. And they've actually just recently, at least the data points that the data provider we like to use have extended it so you can go back 18 months. So you can see who's been in a physical location in the last 18 months. So think about if you've got a brand new hotel and you know who if you're trying to shift market share from competition over to your hotel, you can actually say, I want to have frequent business travelers that have, been to these specific locations in the last 18 months. And you, again, using that data layering technique, you can say that, I want frequent travelers. So I don't want people that have just been there one time. I want people that maybe have visited that location more than once. And then it shows them display ads for your hotels. I think some of the other more creative ways that you can use this type of display advertising is like if you're an airport hotel and you're targeting people that, fly in and out of a specific hotel, out of a specific airport. Again, we can use with the data layering component, you can say, I want people that frequently fly in and out. And then you can even exclude by the understanding the patterns of the individuals coming in and out. You can determine who's an employee and make sure they don't get those ads. You're not wasting those funds on potential people that work at the airport. Another use case that makes a lot of sense is, we have hotels that are in your convention centers. A lot of times if there aren't preferred hotels and they just can stay anywhere, in the city, if that's a yearly conference or a yearly convention, you can place, you can get down to the specifics of, I want attendees that went to this convention on this date. And so you actually can hone in on the people that went to that specific convention and send ads to those people. So again, this is, these are great for awareness. And the other thing that's really cool is, you continue to understand the tracking of those individuals, and you can determine if those people actually came in like foot traffic and came into your specific hotel. So this works for both branded and independent hotels. Easier if an independent, because you can actually place, the pixel on your website. But if you're a branded hotel, you can still track that foot traffic back to your hotel if they've seen that ad. So some really cool stuff there. Remarketing is going to be a lower funnel tactic that can be done through display. So again, depending on your hotel, depending on your brand, there's different remarketing techniques that can happen. So even if you're a branded hotel, by using, there are certain brands that allow you to do some additional remarketing for your specific hotel. But even if not, you can do search remarketing. So basically people that have searched for specific keywords that are relative to your market, you can show them display ads. But as I mentioned before, you can also do remarketing through social. So if you're a branded hotel and you've sent somebody a specific ad or they visited your page, you can continue showing them ads within that social ecosphere without having that website tracking in place. So I think this is a good, the stalker ads are always good to keep that top of mind, understanding the frequency and how many times someone has to see your hotel before they actually make a transaction. So I think that utilizing remarketing, understanding your brand and what your capabilities are is pretty key to your total paid media strategy. So again, when you think about sitting down and looking at your budget and saying, where do I want to spend money? I think it's important to have a conversation with your sales team, with your revenue management team, and understand where exactly you have the gaps and where you need to use paid media to close those gaps. So, are you hurting because you don't have exposure? Are you hurting because you're not converting well? Are you hurting because you lack exposure on specific channels? So really looking at your entire customer journey and breaking that out to put paid media against that, especially from a seasonality standpoint, makes a lot of sense. But also, I just believe in communicating with the owner, like if you're going to do XYZ, really setting the expectation. So if we're running a campaign, we can tell you realistically, what type of metrics we can see so that you can set the expectations properly with your ownership team. So I went through that super fast on this wonderful Friday afternoon. I'm going to open it up for questions and see if anybody has anything that they want to add or any, specific use cases that they might want to share with some of the paid marketing we've talked about today.
I actually had a question on email campaigns. So what would you recommend a minimum number of emails to send out to in order for it to be successful? I know the example you gave, one of them was like 50,000. Is that enough, or should we be sending them to more people? What are your thoughts?
So that 50,000 was kind of what we use for budgeting for impressions for people that have no brand awareness. If you already have your own database, I think you can probably start seeing a decent engagement with around 500. So if you have your own kind of sales CRM, we always try to scrub that database first, and then certain brands require you to scrub that against their brand list. But so you can usually expect probably a 20%, especially with COVID. If you haven't done a scrub on your CRM database before, you can expect about 20%, maybe 30% to be, no longer active emails. So 500 on the sales side. If you're looking at independents and you can incorporate some type of, CRM like Revenate, something like that, as long as you have some PMS history, then, and you've been at least open for 6 months or a year, then you're probably going to have enough people a large enough database to make that worthwhile. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Good stuff. We did get in the chat. We will have access to I'll be sharing out the recording as well. We'll get it on our social channels. And then also I know there was kind of text heavy on some of the slides. So we'll make sure we share the PDF out as well if you want to scroll through any of that. As I mentioned earlier, if there's anybody that wants to be added to our monthly collaboration call, I see somebody in the chat wanting to get added, so we'll definitely get you added. We just once a month, no agenda, just kind of sharing best practices. Sometimes we'll share use cases like some of the ones that we went over today. Other questions from the group?
I actually had another question. Sorry.
Go for it.
So what would you recommend? So we have a few hotels where their brand.com contribution is down a little bit. And, all the brands that I talk to, they recommend Meta. And I'm kind of in a similar boat with you on the thought process. So I'm kind of trying to figure out, some other areas to look at. Like we're looking at our SEO strategy and how we look organically. But do you have any other thoughts on how we can help improve that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess the first thing I would say is if you see brand.com contribution down, is that because you've seen a pickup in group? Like is your in-house, sales team kind of rebounding? So is there a reason for that decrease in brand.com? So once you kind of figure out the why, because I think we've seen that in a lot of hotels in terms of seeing that we saw it increase during the pandemic. And then once we kind of see that level set of bringing sales stuff back, we've certainly seen that change. If you see brand.com, and again, I guess the other piece of that, is it because it's shifting to OTA?
Right.
So if you're analyzing your SEO, I think that's a good place to start organically. Do you need to supplement that with SEM? But I would have a conversation with your sales and revenue management team and understand, is there certain segments that are underperforming, from brand.com? Is it, underperforming because of AAA? Is it underperforming because of, lack of wedding group? I think there's a lot of different reasons that brand.com could be down that you could build very specific campaigns, whether that's through social, whether that's through email, whether that's through SEM, to really get niche and not have that kind of, that mentality where Metasearch isn't gonna, it may increase your brand.com, but it's not gonna necessarily get you that incrementality that's sustainable over time.
Right. Awesome. That's super helpful.
The other thing that we actually posted a 30-point checklist on our blog. I can drop that in the chat, but that basically says if you feel like you have a property like that that's underperforming, like it kind of goes through step by step. Here's all the things you probably want to look at to see if you have a gap in your online exposure somewhere.
Yeah, I'd love a link to that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Find that really quick.
Hey, Steph, have a question for you. Have you had any success with Met campaigns?
Met campaigns. I think generally we don't see a great revenue production number from Met. If it's, we might see, a 2-to-1 return, but I think there's value in getting in front of 20 to 25,000 Marriott Bonvoy members. We really think it's important, especially if you have a Marriott that leaves the market, like if they're doing a flag change, you can target people that Marriott Bonvoy members stayed at that hotel. And then we also see some markets that are just really, really heavy in Marriott, or maybe even, of your same brand. And I think it makes sense to do it then. But from an ownership standpoint, we promote that as more of a awareness play and less so of a revenue production, because we don't usually see a ton of direct revenue attribution to those campaigns.
Yeah, same. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good questions. Finding that blog, I'm dropping that in the chat right now. Other questions from the group? All right, there that is in the chat. Does anybody have any questions specifically around the programmatic or device ID targeting? In case I didn't explain it well, I have somebody on my team that can that knows the intricacies probably better. Well, definitely knows intricacies better than I do.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that actually, and if any of the brands have tools to kind of help figure out who to target and all that jazz.
But a lot of times it depends on the brand as well. With it,
right?
So shoot me a note. I'll drop my email in the chat too. Drop me an email specifically. Let me know what type of hotel it is, and then I'll at least be able to give you some parameters around what your options are.
Perfect.
All right. Well, anybody that has any other questions, feel free to shoot me a note offline. Again, we'll be getting this online so you can share it, both the presentation and the recording, after you clean up some of the audio in the next week or so. And have a great weekend and fun budget season planning. Mm-hmm. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.